VR for the fact that they can be more free because they be in their avatar, as many people who say it's tiring
Yeah.
and I have to really think and focus. So it's so interesting, that intersection. What got you interested in the first place?
Oh, I used to teach a class at DePaul. So I was studying social media and interpersonal interaction there. And then I started teaching this Discover class just kind of on a whim on augmented reality. And then that really sort of dragged me into to virtual reality. Um, and so that's really sort of where some of the interests came in. And then of course as a social scientist, I'm sort of interested in what you can and cannot manipulate.
Well, it sounds like fun, and it sounds like you're learning as you go, which is a great that's awesome.
I think
Yeah.
you have to in VR, right?
Yeah, you definitely do. Hi there, Lynette. I'm Caroline. If you can hear me, I'm standing kind of behind you. But welcome to VR Air Chicago. And um, if you have a question, we have a chat down in the lower, actually, it's right at the top left of the screen. Um, and you can click the chat and then you can enter any question you have if you're having audio issues. Um, we can give you some thoughts on that. But welcome to VR Air Chicago. We're going to get started in just a minute here. We're just working out some more technical things. And I hope all of you who are present with us will be thinking through some questions that you want to ask our panelists. We have Avi Barziz and Shelley Peterson here in this environment. And then we will have Scott Lynch and Ron in the other environment. So it's kind of a cool mixture of in person and virtual. But I do think that whole idea of the outlook of XR, the state of XR, the future of XR and immersive tech is so much. It has so much to it.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask everybody in our physical space here at 2112 to please take your seats.
I think we're going to get started.
I'm going to start calling people out by name. That's you, Apoorv. That's you, Charlie. Patrick. Gentlemen, please take your ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're going to get started in a few minutes here.
I
I'm
don't know
also
if you can
intending
hear
to
me,
send audio
Lynette, but
into
if you
China
can,
right
if you
now
can use your
for
mouse or
people
the
because I
arrow
want to
keys
know that
on
you
your
are streaming
keyboard
to YouTube. So
to
that'd be very
move your
appreciated.
avatar over to where those seats are, that would
If
be
you can click
helpful.
on mute, Frank,
If
it's
you
working.
can't, that's okay. But if you have a way
Hello,
to put anything
can
in
you
the
hear me?
chat, if you have a question, just let me know. Oh, there we go.
Hello, Caroline, can you hear me?
You're all the way in the back. Well, hopefully you can see things, Lynette. Feel free to move yourself up closer if you can't. And I'm going to go on camera here.
Check. Hey, Caroline, can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's a little bit muffled, but I can hear you.
That's because I didn't megaphone myself yet. How about now?
There we go. I
Excellent.
can hear
Wanted to
you
let
much
you guys
better
know that you
now.
are streaming into YouTube right now. Whatever you've been saying for the last 5 minutes or so has been streaming.
I
Sorry.
realize that. I
Sorry.
realize that.
All right, we're gonna get started in a few minutes. Apoorv, take a seat. Patrick, thank you. Please take a seat. Charlie's grabbing a drink. That's perfectly fine. We're checking levels right now. We're running into the stream. Sorry for the delay. We had a couple of technical difficulties and had to swap out a computer or two. but everything seems to be ready to go. So we are going to get started in just a moment here. You good? Ooh, we got music coming from the other room. That's nice. Okay. People are quieting down. People are taking seats. This is good. Are you set? All right. Time, are we ready? We are recording. Excellent. Welcome, everybody, to the next evolution. Always great to have, lovely technical difficulties right as we get started. Caroline, can you hear me? I do want to verify once again that you're good to go.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So welcome, everybody. For those of you who have not been here before, this is the next evolution. Show of hands, who has and hasn't been here before? Who has been here before? Show your hands. Who has never been here before? Ooh, awesome. Love to have some new people. Great. Okay, so welcome to the next evolution. Tonight we are here to discuss immersive technology industry outlook. So basically where things have been, where they're going. We have a really, really good panel of experts here who've been around the space for, not to call anybody out, but a long time. My name is Matt Wren. I am the founder of VR/AR Chicago and the Next Evolution. I'll say that my passions and expertise span a whole lot of emerging technologies, and just come up and say hi to me and talk to me if you want to know more about me. With that said, the Next Evolution is also AWE Nite Chicago event series. It is now and always will be 100% free to attend. Because of that, please consider donating to keep this programming possible, because it's free to attend, it is not free to produce. As you can tell, since we had to swap out computers. I'm going to leave this QR code up really for about a second here, just so in case anyone wants to scan it, because that is a direct link to make donations to support this event series. And it's going to go away in about 2 more seconds. And that's it, because we have some really exciting news that we need to announce about what is happening this summer. For the first time since 2018 in Chicago, is we are doing the Chicago XR Summit. Charlie, were you at the last Chicago XR Summit in 2018? Oh, was anyone here? Scott was. There we go. Excellent. So we had a Chicago XR Summit back in 2018. It sold out. It actually oversold the venue we were in. Luckily, this time around in 2025, we have a much bigger venue. So we'll probably have capacity for between 500 and 600 people to attend. We'll have 25 to 30 exhibitors. We have already partnered with pretty much every economic development or innovation organization in the city of Chicago. To rattle off a few besides 2112, P33 Discovery Partners Institute, Team Working by TechNexus, the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, Discovery Partners Institute, did I say them? MXD. Basically, we reached out to about 14 organizations. So far, 11 of them have already confirmed that they're part of it. On the XR industry side, Augmented Reality for Enterprise Association, Augmented World Expo, and XR Women have already partnered as well. And again, I just reached out to most of them 2 days ago. So this is going to be, frankly, the largest XR event in the city of Chicago ever. And we're looking forward to having you all there. More information will be forthcoming. Like everything else, the Next Evolution, it will be free to attend. With that said, not free to produce. Okay, so the Next Evolution is also AWE Nite Chicago. There are more than 30 AWE Nites all over the world. If you would like to attend AWE, please scan this QR code for a discount, or frankly, come and talk to me afterwards, and I'm happy to talk you through how to get there for an even larger discount, depending on your how you're going to show up. Save the date for Augmented World Expo USA, Asia, and Europe. USA is June 10th through 12th, basically the week following Chicago XR Summit in Long Beach. And then Asia will take place in August, and XR Europe will take place in December in Brussels. You can also attend AWE academies and learn all sorts of skills. Check out awexr.com for more information. With that said, we are beyond grateful to thank our annual sponsor for this year's event series, UL Solutions, because they are the one organization that actually gave us sponsorship for the entire year. So thank you very much, UL Solutions. UL, by the way, is behind the 8400 standard, which is the safety standard for virtual reality and augmented reality equipment. Okay, moving on. Thank you to our venue sponsors. Is Scott here? Where's Scott? He's up front somewhere. Are you going to come up and talk, Megan? Let's come and introduce 2112, unless Scott really wants to run. So we do want to thank our physical venue sponsor that we are in today, and that we'll be frankly holding a lot more events on in the future. Microphone right there. Oh. All right, here we go. Just go.
Hello, welcome to 2112. We are very happy to have you, always happy to host VRAR. We are a creative incubator space. We host a lot of incubator activities. We do a lot of creative tech and a lot of entertainment related tech, as well as more classic entertainment businesses. So if anybody's interested, let me know.
Thank you, Megan. Can I have the microphone back? Thanks. All right, turn that off. That'll be for our presenters in a moment. We do want to also thank our other venue sponsor, 1871. I'm sure some of you have heard some recent news that 1871 is giving up their space in the Merchandise Mart after next month, after April, at the end of April. We will still be holding our April event at 1871. So come on by for our last sort of hurrah at the venue in the Merchandise Mart. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Caroline to introduce our virtual space and herself, frankly.
Thanks so much, Matt. I'm Caroline Dennis, and I'm excited to have you all here tonight. I'm with 2 Degrees, and I work at the intersection of immersive technologies and a whole lot of other technologies. And my work with global communities is fueled by the people, the tech, and humanity. So in addition to working with VR Air Chicago, I work with XR Women, and I'm also part of a global incubator called Symphony, where we are building an IEEE standard for inclusive, sustainable smart cities. I would also like to share a little bit about XR Women, who is one of our partners here at VR Air Chicago. XR Women has grown to over 1,200 women and allies from over 60 countries. We have put on, now counting at 209 events since 2020. Those happen in a variety of different platforms virtually. And we are a leadership and innovation collaboration. And since then, we've had probably 230 women take the stage. So it's a pretty incredible organization. If you want to learn more, please message me, or I can share some information about connecting with XR Women. Tonight, we are in an environment called Frame, and it's a web XR platform. And what that means is that you can enter this environment on your laptop, on your mobile, or your headset. So it's pretty flexible and pretty cool. And if you're in person and you want to check this out, we invite you to come and visit because it's very cool and it's very simple to get here. So, okay, I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Caroline. With that, we also have a lot of great community partners that support these events. So we do want to call out 2 Degrees IO, who Caroline just introduced, the Independent Game Developers Association of Chicago, Envision, and Patched Reality. They're here doing demonstrations, so if you'd like to see their technology, check them out. We also definitely have to thank our beverage sponsors. So Revolution Brewing and System Seltzer, they provide our beverages, our adult beverages for these events. We do want to call out, for those of you looking at the System Seltzers, that they do have varying levels of alcohol in them, so 0%, 5%, and 8%, so make sure you check the can if you're concerned about that before you open it up. And with that said, let's talk about why we are here this evening. Because at the beginning of this year, we wanted to host 2, for those of you who've been coming to these events for a long time, we generally every month we pick an industry and we focus on that industry. We got a lot of feedback from our audience after last year that we needed to sort of take a step back and cover some more general topics, and that's what we're doing for the first 2 events of 2025. So we did how to create immersive content last month, and this month we're talking all about the XR industry outlook, and we've assembled a great panel of experts to discuss this. So the immersive technology industry is at a turning point. It's gaining traction in healthcare, education, workforce training, but frankly, some of the widespread adoption remains to be a challenge, partially due to AI, frankly, commanding all of the headlines, evolving hardware, thank you, Meta, and uncertain business models. Again, thank you, Meta. Despite any of the skepticism, though, XR adoption is accelerating and directly benefiting the organizations that implement it. Immersive technology is becoming more integrated into daily workflows, with businesses using VR and AR for employee training, remote collaboration, customer engagement, and more. AI-driven XR applications are also enhancing interactivity and personalization, making these experiences more adaptive and realistic. As more companies invest in spatial computing and mixed reality, XR is positioned to become as commonplace as smartphones and personal computers once before. Advancements in AI and generative technologies are making XR content creation easier and more cost-effective, while lighter AR glasses and budget-friendly VR headsets are expected to drive adoption. Businesses are already using immersive tech for virtual try-ons, digital product demonstrations, and remote customer interactions. However, trust and usability remain key hurdles, with concerns over data privacy, cybersecurity, and system integration needing to be addressed, particularly at the enterprise scale. Companies that combine XR with AI and other emerging tools will likely see the greatest return on investment. Looking ahead, the industry is poised for steady growth, but turning interest into widespread implementation still remains the biggest challenge. And with that said, I'm going to introduce our first panelist, who's sitting right up front here. Scott Lynch is a pioneer in immersive immersive storytelling and entertainment, who founded the XR studio Voyeur in 2019. His work combines volumetric video, point clouds, and stereoscopic 360 filming to blend narrative, emotion, and environment into transformative experiences. He's an active member of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, Emerging Media Peer Group, working alongside with other national media professionals to develop best practices for new storytelling technologies. Additionally, he co-founded the Chicago Virtual Production Group to promote the use of emerging technologies within the creative industries in the region.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, this is a great. Thanks, Matt, for inviting me to speak here. So yeah, my name is Scott Lynch. And just as a note, my office is actually here at 2112. We are actually anchored over there. We will actually have some headsets if you want to see some of our work after the presentations and things wrap up. Make sure to see us over there. We'll show you some of this stuff. So yeah, next slide. So my background is in filmmaking. I started filmmaking back in the early 2000s. And so a lot of my interests in immersive media really came out of my interest in storytelling. And what I started to realize is that it was the way I was using cinema and traditional cameras in kind of the first half of my career was something that XR could really do well. Like I always wanted to show what it felt to be somewhere, or what it was like to travel to a different place. And this is something that XR does incredibly well. And so I actually pivoted my career from filmmaking to XR started in 2016. I did a commercial for Fiat. And somebody asked me if I knew how to stitch, and I was like, I can figure it out. And so that kind of shot me off on a trajectory to where I am today. So we're gonna play some content and some BTS of the kind of work that we do. So we primarily have traditionally worked in 360 video. That felt for us like a really great way to show real world content without the limited processing power that you kind of get in standalone headsets. So we really kind of focus on 360 video, but that's pivoted where we now will use a whole spectrum of technologies, whether it's 360 video cameras, whether it's Gaussian splats, whether we're working with AI, we're working with mixed reality now. We also work a lot with the Unreal Engine, a lot in 5.5 now. So as I think about media and entertainment moving forward, we see a lot of interest in doing interactive, immersive content. Both like for now, if you look here, this is a project that we did for Samsung. So a lot of it's using it for training. So we're finding a lot of success both with the clients that we work with as they deploy this for all of their different goals. Like the ROI that they're getting on some of these projects is quite impressive, just because the way you as a viewer interact with the content is so much more personal that like it matters more, the content, than it like just like a video that's playing or something that you're gonna scroll past. So so this kind of just shows some of the different techniques that we use. Like it's a lot of work to put together something, it's a lot of cleanup. But really the end result is you get this very seamless experience that feels natural. And that's really what we keep going towards. Another project that we worked on last year was the first television show type of series that was ever made for VR headsets. This was The Faceless Lady. It was produced by Eli Roth, who is a horror director. And this is a 6-part series that his company produced in partnership with Meta. And so this is kind of just a couple of clips of some of the cleanup and behind the scenes things that our team had worked on for that project. But we're really seeing this interest in doing more high-end entertainment for XR content. As we talk about adoption being an issue, some of the things is like there's hardware, but sometimes you run out of things to do. So that's kind of like where we really feel like we fit into the industry, is that we are really helping these companies provide content so that people spend more time in this space. So that was my short presentation, and then I think we were going to move to like a Q&A.
Yes, we are. Give me a few seconds here because I need to. Actually, Scott. So, quick question for you. You already answered kind of how you got into this. Are you seeing more attention at this point on the creative projects where you're creating, essentially like TV series, and as you were saying, the more creative projects that are for entertainment based, or are you more commercial, where you're actually working with companies and producing things for them that are expected to have an ROI?
Good question. If you had asked me this question 6 months ago, I would have said we are primarily 80% industrial or enterprise type of content. Over the past 6 months, I've seen a strong shift in the entertainment industry wanting to utilize our services in some capacity. Kind of started off with doing some of like the Faceless Lady project, but that's really kind of snowballed into a lot of things we've been doing recently are for virtual production, which is a technique that's used inside of the film industry, where they use massive LED screens like this, but like a whole room, and creating content for that, whether that's driving plates or whether that's environments. And then even this week, I probably had, 3 or 4 different people reach out more about entertainment style projects for this medium. So I think we might be starting to see a shift from the enterprise world, which is generally where the projects were, and it's now starting to shift more into consumer. And then we as a company are starting to shift our focus from just serving the enterprise side of things, and thinking more about sort of direct-to-consumer products or direct-to-consumer applications that we are going to develop internally to then release. We're starting to see that market finally be fertile after 8 years now.
Always takes longer. Okay, so next question for you, because again, this event is about industry outlook.
Yeah.
So where do you see things going? Where, if you had to look forward 5 years, 10 years, what are you sort of expecting? And again, no one's going to hold you to these predictions, but where do you see things going in the next 5 or 10 years in terms of, I'll say obviously specifically the film within VR?
Yeah, well, really the biggest impact that we see happening right now is like the impact of AI with like video generation, VFX, and also like customization of that video content for users. So we as a company are starting these kind of more cutting edge tools that are just starting to come out of the market. We really think that that's gonna, like AI specifically, I'll say it right now, but I think it's gonna totally eat the bottom half of the video and film world. Like that's all going to become mostly AI generated content, and kind of the high end stuff will still be done with like cameras and people on sets and things like that. But you're going to really, I think that's gonna, if you're kind of in mid market right now, there's going to be a lot of people that can generate stuff that looks as good as you can shoot, that they can just prompt. And so I think you just need to be aware of that kind of thing. But I think it's also going to affect how spatial stuff gets made, because we need AI to just power all this content, whether it's Gaussian splats or spatial, spatial environments. Like, we need AI to because there's just not enough labor to create that content. So it's going to like really impact the 2D film world, but it's going to really open up the possibilities in the spatial world.
So I'm gonna dig in on that question that we just said there, just one, for another minute or so, if you could.
Yeah.
Let's talk about not so much AI just being used to generate, but AI being used essentially as a tool to aid the manual creation process, the editing. How are you guys using that?
Well, recently we actually started a new company called, what's it? Yeah. So we started just a brand new company called Local recently, that really is focusing on scanning spaces as a platform. And so we are leaning a lot into Gaussian splats, which are this new rendering technique for capturing real spaces and turning it into essentially really good looking 3D models. Well, it's not models, but it's representation of 3D space in a way that looks good. And so we are really, so that's powered by AI models. And, so we're really seeing that as like a big part of the future. And we basically started a new company to really just focus on optimizing workflows and platforms for that specific technology.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Scott. We'll have you come back up for the actual Q&A towards the end, but you're good for now. I'm going to pass it over to Caroline in just a moment. Please, give him a round of applause. Thank you. One thing I am going to say before we transition to Caroline, hey, Ben, I see you over there. Please feel free to come back over here and join the stage presentation. Just kind of watch for people coming in, and I guess if they need to check in, they can. But if you want to come back over here and leave the desk, that's fine. With that said, Caroline, please take it away.
Yeah, and Avi, I'd love for you to come up, your avatar, to join us here at the stage. And there he is on the screen, everybody. Avi Barziv has been a pioneer in spatial computing for over 30 years. So talk about people who've been in the industry a long time. He's contributed to major projects like Disney's Aladdin VR, Second Life, Google Earth, HoloLens, Amazon Echo, Frames, and Apple Vision Pro. Now, as founder and president of the XR Guild, he focuses on advocating for ethical XR development and consulting for top companies and addressing key issues like privacy, AI, and immersive technologies' societal impact. So welcome, Avi, so much. So glad that you're here, and I will turn it over to you. And you can turn over and take a look at your screen here to your right and see your slides. Yeah.
Yep, I got it zoomed in. Thanks. Thanks for inviting me. I'm pleased to be here. That was a great intro. If you could go to the next slide, I'm gonna keep one more. That's just a placeholder. There you go. So Carolyn mentioned some of the projects that I've worked on. Here's some graphics to go with that. I've had in 33 years, and this is 1992, I think is when I started. I've had the amazing opportunity to work on some really fun projects, and some of them turned out to be fairly impactful. Just really glad for those opportunities. And one of the things that I like to do is also try to give those chances back to other people. So that's one of the reasons I work on the Guild is to pay it forward to others who could benefit from similar, pay it forwards that I received in my career as I started. So thank you. So we actually did coin the term spatial computing, at least as applied to VR. It's been used in GIS before, but 33 years ago, we were using this term. And I've had the good fortune to work on all these other projects as well. Keyhole turned into Google Earth, and most recently, the biggest thing I worked on was Apple Vision Pro, which we might want to talk about later. But the HoloLens was also a big breakout, getting Microsoft to really buy into AR. And Echo Frames, if you don't forget, was an attempt to start at the low end of something that's a little more like the Meta Ray-Bans today, something that might just be audio only, and then maybe add cameras, and then maybe add a display later, but start with something fashionable. So that was a really, I think, important way to come at the problem. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? So one of the things I like to talk about a lot is, and I think Matt talked about this a little bit too, is the hype cycle and where all the attention goes. So this is just my attempt to graph what I remember of all the attention cycles. And it's sort of a complement to the kind of Gartner hype cycle, but puts it all in one place. And you kind of get to see that when one cycle is up, the other cycles are down. There's never more than one thing really hot at any given time, but they come and go. So the AI cycle was the most recent one that we went through. Of course, we had the metaverse cycle. And I'm kind of glad that spatial computing didn't turn into one of these giant blown up things, because I think it's a term that can stick around for a long time, but it doesn't need to be hyped. It's just a very descriptive term for the kind of things that we do. But of course, AI is coming down a little bit as people realize that it's not good for everything. And I think that Scott's observation that it kind of blows out the lower 50%, I think is a good one, because if you think of AI as the average of all people put together, somehow it's sort of the collaboration of all of us with or without our consent. You got to remember, if it's the average of all of us, then if you're like a really good writer, you're still going to be above that average. But if you're a really bad writer, it might bring you up to the average. So AI is kind of great for people when they need a shortcut, but it's not great if you're already really good at something. It isn't necessarily going to make you better. It might just save you some time. We're starting to realize that. If you want to move on to the next slide, one of the things that comes up just in terms of industry outlook is, what's that going to do? Like, how are we going to deal with this? And we've been through this before. This is not new. The printing press was incredibly disruptive to the prior industries, and it took hundreds of years, but eventually, hopefully it doesn't take hundreds of years. Hopefully we're talking about on the order of hundreds, maybe a couple dozen months. But eventually it led to a set of rights that people had. The authors had moral rights, there are publisher rights, purchaser rights. All this stuff got worked out. It just took a long time back then. And hopefully we're going to spend a little more time figuring out the right way to handle this so that people are not abused, so that creators are actually valued and rewarded. And it's in the AI company's best interest to not be stealing content, because they're going to need more of it. They're going to need people to create more stuff. And so we have to have an economy that actually creates a richness for everybody involved, and not just the people who are paying for the technology. Next slide, please. Another issue I think that comes up, this made me feel like switching gears, but it's a short presentation, is that the metaverse topic that we talk about a lot, I think has gone a little bit off the rails, especially when you talk about the way Meta's doing it. There really is a key difference between what they think of as the objective reality that everybody shares and brings in all sorts of bad actors, and a consensual reality which is more like this. Like, people here who might misbehave are going to get kicked out. There's rules, there's ways that we behave, but you don't see that in large groups. So this is something that we're going to have to grapple with as an industry, to come up with standards of behavior that can apply, and we're not really ready to do that yet. That's a good reason why the metaverse has not really taken off. I'm almost at the end of 5 minutes, so we'll go breeze through the last two slides. If you can go one more. Next slide. I set a timer for myself. So really what we're trying to build here is the idea that we can put UX anywhere. The world becomes our canvas for being able to put UX. And one of the most important qualities of that, if you go one more slide, and this will be my last one, is that it really fosters collaboration. I mentioned AI is essentially collaboration among many humans, voluntary or not. What we really want to enable is collaboration among humans with AI as an adjunct to that. So we should be thinking of ourselves as being in these custom spaces with other people, and with AI helping out, and with awareness of what our kids and our pets are doing. And this is really the vision for where, sort of in terms of industry outlook of where all this stuff is heading, is a full virtualization of reality, but it's a layer on top of reality. We're still grounded in reality, but we get to bring in all these extra things, all these really cool tools on top of it. But we're still human at the end of the day. We haven't lived in the computer. We're not uploading ourselves. We're just making our lives better, and that's the goal that I work for. And so at some point, I'm sure we'll talk about the XR Guild and how that might play into that. But that's all my slides for right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Avi. So I have to ask, since you have talked about and you've been working in the area of privacy, and there is such a need for governance and for transparency, I'm curious about if you have any thoughts about utilizing decentralized economies like blockchain and others. And I know that some of that is still nascent, but the foundational concepts around those are that they can incentivize a governance in a way that enables people to have a voice and to have it just has a lot of that potential. So I'm curious about if you've ever what your opinions about that is.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of opinions on that. I think that the first thing is just that these are good ideas, but they've had really crappy implementation in technology. So whoever has been implementing things like wallets, crypto wallets, should be fired because the things are unsafe. They really are not appropriate. The fact that somebody can come in and steal all your stuff by clicking on one thing is just that's just negligent. And that's true of a lot of the design of a lot of these crypto systems is they really were built with good ideas, but really not very good technology, not the least of which is the fact that that proof of work will eventually consume all the energy on the planet if you follow the trend. So we have some better technologies now. We have proof of stake. We have other things that improve it. But the goal of decentralization is a good one in that we should take the power back from these massive tech companies that are controlling everything and have more control over our own data, have more control over the choices that we make. And I think a moderate example of that's not an example of crypto, is I spend a lot more time on Blue Sky now, where you have a lot more control over your own feed, right? So you get to pick how you want to consume the data. You don't have to follow what an ad-driven model is trying to force on you. You still wind up doom scrolling these days, but that's a separate issue. You do have a lot of control, but it is still somewhat centralized. Places where decentralization really matter are the places where a company can either go out of business and take all the data with them, or potentially sell the data. Like, for example, 23andMe we're talking about them being bought. What happens to all of your private DNA data when somebody buys them? Who buys them? Is it going to be private equity? Who knows? And so you really want control of that. But you don't want to be putting really private data out on a public blockchain. That's a mistake I think a lot of people make, is to say, we could just encrypt it. It's not going to work, because any encryption that you use today can be broken in 5 or 10 years, and that data will never go away. So we have to be really, really careful about the tech that we use. Sorry, that's a little bit of a long answer, but there's lots of nuance there.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. So I'm curious about if you can describe one ethical challenge that the industry needs to address before XR can really build a greater adoption. What do you
Yeah.
think that might be?
Well, I mentioned a few in the talk that I won't spend too much more time on, but this idea of these shared objective spaces versus consensual spaces is an ethical issue, because, and by the way, when I say ethics, don't be thinking right versus wrong. It's not about morality. It's about getting the best possible outcomes and learning from the mistakes that we've made. That's how I define ethics. And we should learn that throwing a bunch of strangers into a room with no rules doesn't work, right? That's an ethical issue. Do we keep trying that, or do we learn from it and try something new? We talked about a few of those issues with blockchain, and AI has a whole bunch of these ethical issues, which I think in this case, the ethical issue with AI is we need to create an economy that benefits everybody, right? The companies that deploy the tech should get some benefit because they're spending a lot of capital to get there, but the creators also need to have a benefit from it, and they can't be cut out because we need them. If you don't have creators, it's like a snake eating its own tail. Eventually, you're going to have a bunch of crap, and the AI will just sort of turn into a soup of horrible mid content that nobody likes. So you need human inspiration in the loop, and therefore we have to pay them. That's an ethical conundrum that says, let's figure that out. Let's apply AI to the question of solving the problem of how do we properly compensate incremental improvements in ideas, where people always share ideas and nothing is ever really original, but people do get inspiration along the way. And how do we make sure those people are properly compensated for the value add that they provide, so that they'll keep doing it, so that they'll keep providing value and making the world richer instead of more like mayonnaise?
Yeah, those are great answers. Thank you so much. And we'll have some time at the end to have a larger Q&A. I'll turn it back over to you, Matt. Thank you so much, Avi.
And thank you, Avi. I always love working with people who present a lot because they're watching their own clock. It's great. It's kind of odd. With that said, let me introduce Ron Pedzensky. So Ron, come on up here, grab a microphone. Ron has been engaged in the augmented reality space since 2012 by catalyzing the industry, publishing research, and contributing to books on the subject. He's known for publishing the original AR Glasses Guide in 2016, and he currently serves as the co-chair of the Next Evolution event series here in Chicago. All right.
Thank you very much, Matt. So companies like Amazon, Wayfair, Home Depot, and IKEA and many others have been using what are known as virtual product previews on their apps and on their websites to help their shoppers visualize products in and around their homes. Okay, next slide, please.
Next slide. Sure.
So, so these companies have proven that being able to use a smartphone to visualize a coffee table or a piece of art on your wall, or it really helps provide confidence to an e-commerce shopper online when they're faced with making a decision based on tiny little images on their screen as to whether that big expensive piece of furniture is actually going to fit in their home and look nice in their home. So what they've proven is that it improves e-commerce conversion rates, it reduces the incidence of returns, but the problem is that this technology is very technical to implement and very expensive to implement. So while these big e-commerce companies have this advantage with this tool, the millions of other e-commerce sellers out there are at a disadvantage because they don't have the resources to implement that. So that pretty much is the reason I started the company Envision. We provide virtual product previews as a service for the middle market of e-commerce sellers, mostly built on platforms like Shopify and WooCommerce. So as an early stage startup, I thought it would be an interesting topic to cover in our industry outlook, to take a look at what's going on with funding for AR, VR companies. Next slide. So I compiled some data from Crunchbase. It's a subscription-based database of all things venture capital and startup funding. So I basically pulled together data for companies who were tagged as either AR or VR, and we're looking at data that was produced in the last 3 years, and it's very up to date. It's up through last week, end of February. So I kind of sliced this into years from the most recent year being March of 24 through February of 25, and then the 2 previous years before that. So our first chart that we're looking at here really tells the big picture story about AR, VR funding. So this is the number of companies that were funded, that received some funding over the past 3 years. And as you can see, 2024 is in the gold color there, in the gold bar, and it's less than half of what it was 2 years ago. So that's kind of bleak. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is, while the last slide was a count of companies that were being funded, this one is revenue. I'm sorry, it's dollar based. So this is the amount of funding companies receive. Now, this would look a lot like the previous chart, except that in 2023, Magic Leap got like $580 million in debt financing, and so that's built into that red bar. If you were to take that out, you'd have kind of the same trend line across the last 3 years for the amount of money that's being invested in AR, VR, so equally. Next slide, please. So I know this is probably hard to see for most of you, but what this is a breakdown by funding type and or phase. So that same Magic Leap event is actually visible in the second bar from the right, where you have that very tall red section. So that's much of that is represented by Magic Leap. But I think what's most interesting about this slide is on the far right is what's known as Series A funding. So typically a startup gets pre-seed funding and then seed funding, and then if they're proven to be viable, they go on to earn an A round. And then after that, there's B, C, D. Eventually, there's either an acquisition, liquidity event, or there's an IPO. So, but what you typically see is B, C, D rounds get bigger and bigger and bigger. So what you would expect to see is more money in the B, C, D rounds than the A rounds. But what we're seeing here in this chart is that A rounds make up the majority well, not the majority, but more money has been invested in A rounds. And that could mean a few different things. That could mean that it could be a maturity thing. It could mean the AR/VR companies have not yet progressed to B, C, D, E rounds and liquidity events. But it could also mean that they've been unable to because there's not funding available to them, or perhaps they have not proven viability to progress farther, and many of them may have flamed out. I don't have the information to come to any of those conclusions, but any of those are possible. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So also I understand that you're probably not going to be able to see this, but what this is the Chicago snapshot. And these are all companies that have AR, VR in their industry description, but upon closer look, I wanted to stay true to the data, but many of these companies have nothing to do with AR, VR, and I don't know why they had that tag in their description. So we've got like Sure People, DigsFact, NanoPattern. These companies have nothing to do with AR, VR as far as I can tell, but I left it up there. But others, we've got some alumni from Bumbar in the room. I know that. I know we have people from Omnia in the room. So I think what's most interesting, though, about this data that we're looking at here is augmetics. And this is basically AR for surgery. And what's most interesting is they have been funded $143 million. So they're kind of they're the Chicago AR unicorn. So that's pretty exciting, pretty cool that we have that. But there's really only a handful of AR VR companies in Chicago that have received venture funding.
Watch your clock.
And
You good?
yeah, we're good.
And do the live. Keep going.
Um,
Let's say I got about 1 more minute if you.
Okay, so I think what we're looking at here is a breakdown by dollars for early stage rounds. And interestingly, there's not much disparity from year to year. Last year, seed rounds, we had actually more money in seed rounds across the industry. This isn't just Chicago, than we did in the previous 2 years. So that's pretty cool. Pre-seed was pretty close. Series A also very close. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but I think it's interesting. So next slide. We can skip this. This is just a disclaimer. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Ron. We got time for 1 or 2 quick questions here. So I'm gonna, let's see, I gotta be choosy about this one. Let me start, actually, let's go back a little bit. You've been involved in AR for a long time. You kind of started since 2012 even. So I guess the question I have for you is sort of looking back from there till now, at least, how would that compare to how you would have thought it was going to progress? Talk about where you were like back then. Where did you think it was going to go? What's the comparison? How's it going?
Well, I think anyone who's been around this very long knows that ubiquitous AR, VR is like 5 years out, 5 years out, 5 years out, 5 years out. And so it feels closer than ever. Is it still 5 years out? Maybe. But it just seeing all the big companies pour billions of dollars into research and development in this space is super meaningful. And that's not something we were seeing 10 years ago or before that, or certainly even 5 years ago. There weren't billions and billions flowing in.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here really on a very Chicago specific question. And I'm gonna throw my own biases into this question because I've been there and I've done that a little bit. And I know you're in the same position now that I was 2 years ago, which is that Chicago is really not a good city to try and start a tech company when it comes to getting venture funding. It is publicly known to be difficult here. With that said, Chicago also has a very good reputation for being a very successful company when it does make investments. So we're very good at betting on sure things. We're really not good at making a lot of risky bets. Given, frankly, some of the evidence from immersive technology solutions that are out there right now, what do you think is the path for Chicago specifically to start making the investments in the technologies that are already proven, that basically these are sure things. These are bets that if, we have examples of other companies that have done this around the country, around the world, they implement this stuff, it has a massive return on investment. Scott alluded to that a little bit before. You see this stuff and the ROI is just crazy. So how do we get there and how do we open Chicago up to that?
I don't see how that culture is going to change here in Chicago. I mean, if you're fintech or healthcare tech, you've got a much better chance of getting funded here in Chicago. I think our best bet is that Chicago area companies are able to get funding from elsewhere and still stay in Chicago. And eventually, as those companies succeed, as you said, Chicago investors bet on sure things. So it's not until we become sure things that they're going to start jumping in on that.
All right, thank you, Ron. We'll have you back for the Q&A at the end here. But with that said, I am going to hand it off to Caroline. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. And I'm going to pass it back over to Caroline to introduce our next speaker, Shelley Peterson.
Thank you, Matt. Shelley, if you want to join me up here on our virtual stage. Yeah, come on up. Let's see. Where are you, Shelley? I want to make sure you're here. Oh, there you are. Hi. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you.
Yes. So Shelley Peterson is an XR industry pioneer and thought leader. She highlighted by Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella for her work bringing mixed reality into aerospace to bringing mixed reality into aerospace to manufacture spacecraft. She's been a notable authority of XR in the industry for over 20 years. And I know from her involvement with XR Women and so many interesting projects, Shelley, we're so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to join the group here today.
Can I just interject one thing? If you click down on the bottom to the megaphone, you see that little thing that looks like a megaphone there?
How's that?
That's better. Excellent.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to join you today. If we go to the next slide, back in 2001 at a company, and we worked in monocular for special ops. And it was kind of a precursor had elements of mixed reality or augmented reality. And then I worked for Lockheed Martin for a while on spacecraft, and I just had so much fun with both of them. I eventually thought, well, why don't we combine the two together? So around the 2016 timeframe, this is the first activity, one of the first activities that we ran out on the shop floor. This is the forward bay cover on the right-hand side for Orion, which goes out to the moon. Here on the left side, you see technicians talking through what they're going to do when components show up at our facility in Waterton. Let's go to the next slide. What we found was that there's definitely an ROI in this industry space. Without getting into all of the details, we were basically using augmented reality to identify the location of fasteners. And if you look at the silver flags across the top, this is the savings that we saw in touch labor. So the amount of time it takes technicians to do the work, we were cutting by about 90%. So one shift we would cut down to 45 minutes, or 30 days of work we would cut down to 3 days. So we definitely saw that the ROI was there. Let's go to the next slide. So now one of the things that I do is I help companies figure out how to bring the technology in to make use of it. And I help companies who supply the technology with advising what we can do to make it more effective for those companies. And then more recently, governments have been asking questions. There's labor shortages across the board in almost every industry space. Here you see how Canada is stating that 2/3 of contracts they've turned down or they've lost due to a lack of workers. Let's go to the next slide. They actually reached out a couple of years ago, and one of the things that they told me was that half of their aerospace manufacturing technician positions in Canada are unfilled. And they said, what do we do about it? Do we bring in robotics? Do we bring in AI? Do we bring in XR? How do we solve this challenge? We're probably not going to have enough people. But it's an interesting topic, especially given that we know that XR is fantastic at ramping up people more quickly, more efficiently, and ramping people into positions who may not have considered that position elsewhere. Let's go to the next slide. This is another trend that we see where the number of people over age 55 in the workforce is increasing. The younger group, the 16 to 24, is decreasing. So this is something that in the Department of Labor conversations I end up in, they're looking at metrics like this. Separately, in the XR industry, I have people ask all the time, how do we get older technicians, older people to the table with this technology? And one of the things I noticed at Lockheed was that the more seasoned technicians are fantastic allies. If they've done the job the hard way for a long time, they're likely to appreciate using the technology to help them do things in new and different ways if we design the experience and the user interface in an effective manner. So I could talk about that for a long time, but let's go to the next slide. So this is what the groups often ask is, we need to increase the number of workers in key fields. We need to reduce the time to certification. We need to get people ramped up to work more rapidly. We need to increase comprehension levels. Essentially, we need to do more with fewer people. And let's go to the next slide. So the question is, can XR help? Let's go to the next one. These are some numbers that we've seen in the industry, and it just depends on who you ask and what industry space you're looking into, what the numbers are. But this is an example where you see significant efficiencies in different areas, whether it's the time to ramp up, whether it's once they're testing to certify, reducing the number of times that they need to do that, the action time, the acceleration. So at Lockheed, we saw 85% reductions in the time to ramp up a person to the task. And that could be a person coming in into a new position, with Lockheed, or it could be someone who's worked there for years. And it's the first time they've performed that type of activity in several years. So we have to take them back through training before they perform that activity on a spacecraft. Let's go to the next slide. Here's some additional numbers that we saw. I had this slide a couple of years ago in a presentation. I pulled it for this one. We often saw 90% efficiencies on specific types of activities. We also saw a complete reduction, you don't see it here, but in errors. We scaled this technology across 10 different spacecraft manufacturing sites. And in 5 years, we saw 0 errors, which was probably more impressive to the customers than the 90% reductions in time. Let's go to the next slide. So another thing that we see is we often think of going straight to companies and having that interaction with companies, having the companies pull in the technology. But workforce development is another pathway. If you're a company who is providing an XR solution, or if you're a company that's looking to pull XR solutions into your company, often there's workforce development, Department of Labor funding that's available. And this is an example of what we saw in Colorado. Last year, there was a $92 million Opportunity Now grant that was released, and they've doled this out to about 20 to 30 companies. So some significant funding that's available for advancing the workforce. Let's go to the next slide. And this is just a sampling of the companies that are using XR. But I wanted to throw this up there so that you get an idea of how broad this technology applies. So you see everything from Chick-fil-A to Coca-Cola to Caterpillar to Lockheed Martin, of course, NASA and Netflix, and the list goes on and on. But it can be used in interesting ways. And part of the reason why is because we're jumping out of that rectangular data, and we're allowing a new form of information that really is so much more natural and effective than the rectangles that we're used to. And I think the next slide is the final slide. And this one is just simply a sentiment. This is not a plug necessarily for Apple, though I am an Apple fan. This is more of a plug for the way Steve Jobs did things. And I think that this applies where big ideas, companies that take that approach are much more likely to succeed. All right.
Fantastic. Well, there are so many questions. We won't have time to answer. You wouldn't have time to, I wouldn't have time to ask them all, but one of them that stuck with me is, tell me a little bit more about how you see AI being able to be introduced into the use cases. And oftentimes, really, it's about workforce training and about all the creative ways that companies are using XR now. Can you share a little bit about your vision, your thoughts about that?
So I've seen some interesting examples of AI informing in an XR environment. So if we go back to Iron Man, I bet a bunch of people here have seen the Iron Man movie, and you have Jarvis. And Jarvis was really an AI-enabled XR capability, right? Just another rather very intelligent system where you could ask a question and Jarvis had the data to answer that question, and you could also see three-dimensional content along with that. I had the opportunity to jump on stage with the creator, Ian Dawson, last year at the AWE, and we're about to do another event at Harvard. But we are seeing the early versions of that now. Ian and I actually went to see a co-pilot with XR and AI-enabled capability. And the first thing he said is, it's like Jarvis is becoming real. We were standing in front of an ATV, and you could ask a question. So I just walk up and I say, where's the fuel pump and how do I change it? And it overlays on the actual ATV where it is, and then it starts walking me through the steps to remove it and then the steps to reassemble it. And it wasn't pre-fed in, it was the work instructions that they pulled in, in a true AI path. So, that's very interesting. And then we get into the conversations of, we don't want it to be completely generative because sometimes it can hallucinate. But if it's deterministic enough, meaning for a procedure like that, if I ask the question, I want it to give me the same answer every time I ask it. So we want that deterministic approach. There are organizations now who are looking at that fine balance between AI, generative AI and deterministic AI, so that we get the types of answers that we need in those types of situations.
Right. So you've done a lot of work in the manufacturing and aerospace, and now working with the Department of Labor and Workforce. How do you see the changes in hardware as they have evolved, and what will stick? Because I think there was a lot of people who believed that, the higher priced devices were going to be the ones to sustain in the enterprise and the commercial settings. But tell me about your thoughts on that, because it seems to divert depending on where you're talking about in terms of use cases and industries.
So right now I have a number of companies who reach out to me, and they're in a little bit of a panic mode because they've built their architecture to depend upon a certain type of technology, whether it's a HoloLens or another type of device that may not be around or as available in the future. I'm a little bit numb to the pivots because we were working with the technology way back in the day, and I was a developer on Google Glass before it was released to the public. We were using Google Glass, then we pivoted to another device, ODG, and then when ODG went away, we pivoted to HoloLens, and so on and so on. So one of the areas where I help companies is in the architecture of determining how you plan and how you future-proof your path. Can you develop in a manner where if you need to pivot to another device or another platform, can you do that efficiently? And so some companies are going towards like web-based capabilities, browser-based capabilities, where if the device has a browser, you can pull up the scenario. It feels just like being in a VR or MR environment, but you're accessing it through a browser instead of an app. And so if one device goes away, you pivot to another device. And that's one of the things that we've seen where it takes out a significant amount of the stress if you can pivot when you need to. Right now, there's a bit of a lull in optical see-through capability with HoloLens and Magic Leap and some others phasing out, but there's going to be more devices that come along that fit into that category. We have insight on what's happening, and it's going to be an exciting time coming up. So my recommendation to groups is to architect with a mindful approach and the ability to pivot if you need to.
Great. Thank you, Shelley. We'll have
Thank
some
you.
time again at the end for others to ask questions of Shelley
Okay.
and Avi. Thanks. Back to you, Matt.
Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna actually have all of our speakers come back up, and while they're doing that, we definitely want to talk about the fact, like everyone else, again, we mentioned this at the beginning at the top of the show, I'm gonna bring it up again really briefly here. Like any other organization, we hate asking for money. Plain and simple, we don't like doing this, but as a nonprofit, we need to prove, the value of our program. And so our goal is to keep this event free and accessible to strengthen the XR community. So the questions that I'm just gonna kind of throw out at you folks is, did you find value here? Do you find value coming to this event? Consider what you gain from this event. First of all, look at our panel of experts. We have people, Avi and Shelley and Ron and Scott. These people have been doing this for anywhere between 15 and 30 some years. Like, these are the folks who've been around for a long time. So did you learn something new? Have you made a business connection here? Actually, for those of you who've been to these events before, raise your hand if you've made a business connection at this event previously. Thank you. If you've experienced some cool demos for those of you who are newer, if you've seen something or gotten an introduction to immersive technology, I had a really cool experience last month in that one of our presenters was talking about the fact that her introduction to immersive technology was at one of these events a few years prior. She's like, oh, I was at this event at 1871, like 7 years ago, and now I'm teaching this at DePaul University. I was like, that was this event. Thank you. That was really cool to hear. So with that said, the ways to support us are obviously financial support is great. If you donate, we do have some swag. We have the NFC cards that we can make for people that are custom. We have microfiber cloths, we have stickers. But even if you can't donate financially, please spread the word. Follow our socials, like, repost, share, comment. These are the things that will get the word out and frankly let other people know. As Shelly spoke about, as Scott spoke about, as Ron talked about, those of us who've been around the space, we know that there is insane value in this technology. Not a lot of people do. This is the leading edge of this technology. People don't understand the value that you can gain from this, and a lot of us have been here, done that, seen it over and over again. And it's amazing when you run into a company that's like, oh, I didn't know you could use VR for work. I thought it was for games. Like, yeah, and it has a 90% return on investment. It's great. You should think about it. With that said, so, other than that, please, if you can't donate financially, spread the word about us, follow our socials. We are on TikTok now, sadly. But we're just posting the videos, and honestly, what we're posting there is the clips from this event, because that's where the value is. But also, consider volunteering and helping out. We do have tech demos, we have virtual greeters, we have people who are checking you in, live stream chat engagement, all of that stuff. With that, I'm gonna stop talking about all the support that we need and get back to our questions and answers, because I think everybody is set at this point if I'm looking at my screens correctly. So with that said, actually, oops, went backwards. My slides are going all over the place. I'm gonna go back to all of our presenters. There we go. So with that said, now's the opportunity to talk about this as a group. We do have some questions ourselves. Thank you, Jay. I was just gonna ask you if you were ready to go. So Jay has a microphone. If you do have a question in physical space, raise your hand. We will send Jay over to you. In the virtual space, Caroline will call it out. Caroline, I can see you clearly, so if you just sort of indicate somehow that there's a question in the virtual space, I'll know. Jay, I'm just gonna let you know that Tom is also gonna be monitoring our live stream, so we might get questions that come in over the live stream as well. So I might have to send you to Tom with a microphone. But with that said, I'm gonna throw the first question kind of back. I'm gonna start with Shelly while we're getting ready. Again, feel free to raise your hands if you guys have a question. Shelly, I've asked this question of a couple of our folks here. How do we raise the awareness? Like you were talking about those statistics that just, it is obvious what the return on investment in this technology is. How do we make more people aware of it? Like, how do we get this out there so that it does scale massively?
It's a good question. And one of the things that I noticed, businesses who identify the potential savings sometimes don't want to talk about it because they want a discriminator that sets them apart from their competitors. And in some ways, I see their point, but in other ways, we all need to share a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of the value so that there's a strong ecosystem. We need these technology providers to have enough business so that they stay in business or stay focused on those technologies. I think Microsoft didn't see enough of that type of involvement, and it was a perfect storm with AI surfacing that they made a decision to go that route instead of XR. But there's other companies who we need to make sure that they stay healthy. So sharing the message about what we're seeing is important. And I'll say that when I was seeing 93% touch labor reductions, some people thought that we should keep that very quiet. But we also had others who felt like it was the right thing to do to get the word out and to make sure that we try to help those organizations who are providing us with the solutions to be as healthy as possible. I think another thing we need to do is make sure that stakeholders across the board, where like if we need to train up workforce sources more rapidly, do those organizations know about the technology? That's really how I got in with the Department of Labor in Colorado. Is they were trying to solve challenges, and I'm hearing it. I think that XR would make an impact and help with the challenges that they're trying to solve. And thankfully, it resonated with them, and they're very supportive and looking into the technology. We're seeing it with other countries. We're seeing it with other states. So making sure that we pick the right use cases for the start so that they do see significant value in ROI, I think is also important. There's lots of things that we can do because technology is capable, but we want to pick the ones that provide the value and really allow us to stay with the technology, push it forward.
And the rest of you guys, feel free to, at this point, the Q&A is open, so you guys feel free to jump in on each other and talk. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, so I thought Shelley did a great job covering that from the industrial perspective. Maybe what I can contribute here is consumer perspective. So adoption by consumers, it's going to take use cases, meaningful use cases, it's going to take strong content, and it's going to take social pop culture influence. And I don't mean necessarily on TikTok. I mean, when you're seeing characters in movies or in TV shows who are kind of naturally, using as part of their life or whatever, not just as a sci-fi crush. I think a mix of those things are really what it's going to take for it to be widely adopted by consumers.
In fact, I would add to that. I think for a long time we've struggled with XR technology being a very, at least perceived as like a very isolating experience. And I think like if you look at like the things that really exploded with technology within culture, it's you do something because your friend is also doing something. Like you're gonna go to the movies to buy a ticket to the theater because all your friends are gonna go. Traditionally, we've been in a very like kind of single player mode with XR. I'm really excited about kind of like we're just on the edge of sort of things like co-location and social sharing and some of the things that Avi had alluded to in his presentation. And I think like those social pressures are going to be the thing. Like when everybody else seemingly is doing it, you're like everybody else is want to come along for the ride. And then I think on top of that, it's just like getting headsets on faces. There's a lot of people that have preconceived notions of what XR is at this current moment. Perhaps they tried something 10 years ago, and so they have a kind of a jaded view of like what it is. And still to this day, like a lot of the presentations are like when we do showcases and show people the technology, still like 80% of the people that come to like our booths have never tried a VR headset. So I think there's just like a really just lack of personal knowledge of how this stuff works and what it is actually.
Yeah, I agree with most of the things that have been said. I think that, I don't know, did you want to go on to another question or you want me to answer this?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Avi.
I think Scott's question made some really good points at the end there. I think that it has to be socially acceptable. We are more likely to see the minimalist end of XR pick up before the maximalist end. The minimalist is the glasses, like the Meta Ray Bans, things like that. It is going to be much more popular because you can sell millions and millions of those, and developers will only come when you have millions and millions of potential customers, not when you have 100,000 customers. That's great for really expensive niche kind of solutions like medical and military, but for the really broad solutions, you need millions and millions of customers. So it's going to really start a little more at the low end. And the big mistake we've made, I think, across the board is XR there's a really high bar for a great XR experience. You need to have all sorts of things working for co-presence to be good. Really good spatial audio, really good avatars or personas, all that stuff is really important to get right. That's expensive, So you can't expect to sell millions and millions of those units to start with. So what you need to start with is a two-pronged approach. Start with the minimalist end, that you try to reach everybody with a little bit of tech, but it's very accessible and socially acceptable. And then you start at the high end as well with a small number of units, but highly targeted solutions that are really prove their value. And I've been in these big companies that I've been, one of the early teams trying to convince everybody what to do. Believe me, the companies should know that. This is not rocket science. They should know that when something costs $4,000, you're not going to sell 10 million of them, right? It doesn't make any sense. So they should know that going in. And the only thing I disagree with, I think Microsoft, the big mistake they made was turning it into a cult of personality instead of trying to solve user problems. They centered it on one person who turned out to be somebody that had to go for a lot of reasons, and then jettisoning that person jettisoned and killed a lot of the whole program. So don't make that mistake of put all your eggs in one basket and stand up behind one person if you haven't vetted them. But we're on the right track. It's just, as Ron said earlier, it always seems like it's 5 years away. We have to be patient. It's actually been 50 years of technology evolution to get to this point, and it could be another 50 before it's perfect. I hope I live long enough to see the holodeck, but it's going to take a long time because it's a set of really hard problems. We have to build our way there.
All right, before we get to the in-person question here, I'm going to throw a few cents just because you guys frankly drag this out of me. The one thing I'll say, I've been saying this since 2016. I think business use will drive adoption. I don't think this, consumers are clearly using this technology more than anybody else at this point, but I think at the end of the day, when this becomes a massively adopted scale technology, that will be driven by business use and then transition into things like education in the home. And the other thing I'll say is, I don't think you need the perfect experience. I think very, very simple, very small, very easy solutions that don't even have to be perfect. And again, I'm going to throw this example out here. I do it all the time. Gorilla Tag. Probably one of the ugliest games that was ever produced in VR, but it's also one of the most successful. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work. And if it works, it can, as Shelley pointed out, it provides the ROI. The ROI will then drive the adoption. I'll shut up on that one, and I know we've had a question waiting for a while, so go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. Although I'm one of the founders and believers here in Chicago, I'm particularly optimistic about the industry because I'm dedicating my whole young life to it. So I had a question from what Shelley talked about the browser that's supposed to be cross-compatible, because at Omnia we're trying to basically build a spatial browser that can run on any type of headset. It's supposed to work also on smart glasses that look like normal glasses. We really think we're building this on the inside that we really think apps and app stores are not going to be the main way to distribute content on headset. We really believe in a spatial browser that can be cross-compatible so that everything is contextual and powered probably by AI agents, not similar to what the Jarvis example is. So I wanted to ask, can you elaborate more on what the browser is and how do you see web content work alongside native applications in specific OSs? Because our system, our tech, would be OS agnostic, use case agnostic, industry agnostic. Yeah.
The microphone cut out right at the end. Matt,
He's asking, how do you see the browser-based experiences essentially, how is browser going to be adopting and transitioning the XR experiences and working alongside?
So one thing that I was very excited about, I've been a teacher in the past. I taught at universities and high schools, and I was excited about the technology for education use. But for a long time, I was like, the technology is not ready for that yet because there's a whole IT element. There's a security element. Imagine having a whole classroom of students in devices at the same time. A teacher only has a certain amount of time to teach their topic. They have to, handle what happens if a student has an issue with a device, and the kids have to get in the apps and get going in a very short amount of time. And then I was introduced to a browser-based version of that. where you jump in the device, you open the link, and you're in. And it's collaborative and it works great. If something happens to that device, you jump into another device or a laptop or a tablet or a phone or whatever, and you're in that experience. So from that angle, it's pretty seamless. And then I was like, okay, in the past I've said it's not ready for education settings, like classroom settings yet, but that changed my mind. And then I saw how easy it was to build content for some of those environments and what's starting to be built for education spaces. And I think that there's great potential. So we've put it into universities. We're starting to bring it into some other educational facilities here, and we're even bringing it in for correctional facilities to train people who are about to leave correctional facilities, or helping them to get certified in certain areas to reduce recidivism. So I think it's a great solution for those types of spaces.
I can add to that a little bit. I mean, I'm experiencing this through a browser right now. I could be wearing a headset, and so the technology exists to make XR open and standard and browser based. That what's missing is the standards, and it's going to take a while because everything's evolving so fast. It's a little bit hard to keep up with it, but the Metaverse Standards Forum is doing a great job of trying to connect the dots between the various groups, making sure people are talking, so that will accelerate getting to some standards. And when those are established, I think we will see headset manufacturers make that work. Now, the problem with some of these headsets going away is not standards, though. It's the fact that their headsets required servers that they stopped. They didn't want to pay for anymore. And so the reason why Magic Leap 1 isn't available and HoloLens is that the company has to pay money to keep something going past, what they think of as the end of life, and they just don't want to put money into it. What we need is for the back-end systems to also be standardized such that it could run on anyone's server. So if somebody wanted to do the equivalent of Apache and run a server that could support an XR headset, then whatever services it needs on the back end, that needs to get solved as well, not just the standards for the user experience that we see here.
So when I founded Envision, as I mentioned earlier, this technology was available by Amazon and IKEA, but it was only available on their apps. It wasn't web-based back in 2018 when they debuted it. And that's because browsers just, they weren't capable of being able to interact with the hardware, like the sensors on the hardware yet. And so when that capability arose, that was kind of the signal that there was an opportunity for us to build a browser-based AR experience that we could provide to these millions of e-commerce companies who would not be able to command installs of an app. After all, when people are shopping on an e-commerce website, they have to be able to engage spontaneously. They can't have to interrupt their shopping experience to install an app just to have that one experience on that one site. So browser-based AR was absolutely critical to our business model, and it enabled it. So it's very important.
I know we had a question. We had a question in the virtual space, and then we have two more in the physical space after that. But go ahead, Caroline.
Yeah, I want to call on Bree. And Bree, if you would like to ask the question just before you speak, go ahead and click on that megaphone down on the lower corner there so you can make sure everybody can hear you.
Sure, thanks. So I thought of the question at the beginning of the Q&A, and I think some of it might have already been answered a little bit. But it is on this topic of the technology providers, as Shelley said, not giving a long enough runway. And so I'm thinking of, products that we've already seen come and go, headsets that get taken off the market very quickly. And a product I saw sometime maybe 6 months ago, and I thought, oh, I'm going to use that in my class. But by the time the semester rolls around and my class rolls around, the product's no longer supported. It's dead, right? And so I can't even introduce people to it. And so what I'm thinking is, how do we, instead of all the sort of early, VC investment for things to be hot and quick, how do we encourage uh, folks building out technology to create more sustainable systems, to have a longer runway, so they're not always hitting the early adopters all the time, but they can get to that more sustainable part of the adoption curve that would provide some revenue.
So it's a fantastic question, and it's something that many companies struggle with, and how to stay alive in the early stages. I try to assist some of those organizations from an external angle in trying to figure out how to help them get to a scalable solution more quickly. That's one of the reasons I think that workforce development is a fantastic pathway for some companies, because, for example, in Colorado, they want solutions that they can run in Denver and Colorado Springs, but then they can scale across the state and then scale to other states. So by design, they're trying to scale. And that's different from going into a company with a solution where, if that company succeeds with that solution, they're not necessarily motivated to scale it throughout their industry. So I do think that we need more of that type of involvement within the states, and organizations that can help with the process to scale the technology where it makes sense to.
I think that the companies that either they put out a product and it does well or doesn't do well, that affects the level of support in the future. But either way, they're thinking about maybe coming out with a new version of the product, right? Every year, every 2 years, they have an incentive to want people to upgrade and to not hang out for things. And there's an opposite consumer push, which says, I still have an iPhone 6, let's say. I still want it to work. If that thing fails, I'm going to be pissed off, even if it's running slow and the battery doesn't last. So the companies are between those two boundaries. And you see a company like Apple that does support their products going way back. They do end of life their products, but usually the product stops working long before they stop supporting it. And I think it's the onus will be on the companies to listen to consumers when consumers say, I need this thing to have a 10-year lifespan. I can't sell it. I can't sell it to my customers. I can't use it in my classroom unless I know that I can use it for that long. I don't want to replace it. The companies need to be aware that that's a consumer demand, and they need to support it. And in many cases, they may need to open source, like I said, the back end, whatever expenses they might have could be then taken over by people in the open community, who will then run them on their own servers so that the company doesn't have to own them. The security updates as well. That's usually the sticky point, is the company has to be able to say, we are no longer going to provide security updates for this product, even though it may become vulnerable in the future. And they sort of feel like right now they have an obligation to keep putting out patches, and that costs millions of dollars. They have teams that have to keep churning on these things and putting out software, so that's an ongoing expense that they don't want to have to cover.
No, I'll jump in on that.
All right, go ahead, Charlie.
Just talk into it; it'll pick up.
Okay, all right. So this is an industry outlook session, and I've been to many of these over the years. And if I was at the state of the car industry, and I was able to Google how many people get sick in a car in 15 minutes, and it comes back 40 to 70%, that would be an issue in an industry outlook. Like, how are we going to solve that? Half the people who use our product get sick. And I never see that come up in VR industry outlook conversations. And yet, if you Google how many people get sick in VR helmets, it's 40 to 70%. Now, if that's 10%, if 40 is too much, even at 10%, that's still a lot of people not using your product because they get sick. I happen to work with a creative partner right now, and she can't use a VR helmet because she gets sick immediately. So it's one of those issues where half of my team is unable to use it. So I was just curious, is that even a consideration when talking about adoption into the future when people have a hard time physically using the product as it currently stands?
My thoughts on that are, I'm starting to see a lot better improvement of comfort levels with mixed reality. I think that when you feel grounded in your space, that you definitely are able to be using the spatial technology without having that issue. In fact, I think actually some of it has to do with like the design of these devices. One of the things I feel like Apple made a misstep on is like it's a very it's a pair of goggles. It totally kills off your peripheral vision. And in fact, someone who has for myself, someone who works in a headset pretty much 10 hours a day sometimes. Comfort is, although I don't get that sick, what I've noticed is I like to have a headset that I can fold up. I like a headset that isn't closing off my peripheral vision and using a gasket. I want something that just gives me a little augmentation here, and I want to feel it like it enhances my environment, not separates me from it. And so that I think is a big design flaw that most everybody that works in the VR space has continually made that problem, and they haven't really spent enough time in the headsets to be oh, but maybe I don't want to be completely closed off. So I think the mixed reality thing, even video pass-through, I think that's a big step forward. You get those cameras better, you get the rolling shutter out, and I think the comfort level percentage goes way up.
I'm also going to challenge that AI assumption that 40% get sick in a VR headset. I mean, we've introduced the technology to lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people within our spaces. And I don't know if it's the way that the experiences are developed or what experience they used when they came up with that number or what time frame they came up with that metric, because today the technology is better than it was 2 years ago. But that seems like a really high number to me. But it is something that we do have more considerations in VR for than we did with optical see-through devices.
And I was going to say one thing on that. Isn't it also true in some of the people who are involved in the haptics or the optics of the lenses themselves? That is absolutely right. There have been huge advances in the headsets themselves. Now, of course, with what Bree was saying, with the changeover so many times, that means there are a lot of older headsets out there that people are not able to take advantage of some of the newer ways that those cameras work. But that is my understanding. A lot of that has to do with how they function, and the more dialed in they are, the less sick that you can get. And I have had 3 headsets, and some of them are versions from 2018, and the difference between that and a Meta Quest 3 is light years. I used to get sick all the time, and I don't so much anymore. So yeah.
And it's
Maybe
also the
others.
experience within the device. I can take a single device and there's certain applications or experiences that make me a little bit nauseous, but then there's other apps that I'm fine with. It's all in, I don't know if it's the quaternion logic or what the developers are doing to make it a smoother experience for our brains, but there's definitely a difference between some of them.
There's a little bit better head tracking prediction now than there was. That the screens have gotten better, the latencies have gotten lower, resolution is higher, optics is better. There's lots of little improvements, but I will say, from my perspective, even though I have nice headset, I have a Valve Index, it's a pretty good headset. Until I got a Vision Pro at home, this is the first headset that I can actually wear for hours and hours and hours. Now, not stock. I'm going to put a plug in for the Anna Pro strap thing. There's other ways of solving this, but it puts all the weight on your forehead.
Important. Yeah.
This should have been standard. It puts the weight on your forehead instead of on your face. And I can use this thing without the face adapter, without that face shield. Just speaking of peripheral vision, it looks a lot more like you're wearing a pair of glasses at that point. You can actually see out the sides. You get straight light coming in, so you can't have the windows open. But but it actually works a bit better with this design, even though it's a bit front heavy. I think though the design of the XR part of this, not the ergonomics part, but the actual tech part, that's what I mean when I say the requirements are really high. That it's taken this long to make headsets become decent, and the problem was we kept getting people to try them when they weren't decent. We got a lot of people to have their first experience be on a crappy headset. And even though the game might be simple, like Gorilla Tag is a simple game, I agree with you, the headset was bad enough that it made people sick and they didn't want to try it again. And I've stuck with it over these years, but I've until now finally have a headset that I could use for more than a few hours. It's pretty rare. I polled people, this is 2 years ago, just to see the change, but on Twitter, among developers, 75% of the developers who follow me, people who follow me are generally developers, 75% of them say they got sick at some point. Only 25% said they never get sick. I'm sure it's better today, but the one thing that's not really spoken of much, and Wagner James Au has said things about this, and I've said things about this, is headsets are not well designed for women. There are some different visual system issues that happen with people. Sometimes it's been shown that sometimes this is more common with women, that the visual processing may happen a little bit differently. And the percentage of women who get sick in headsets has always been higher, and probably still is higher. But what I've been calling on is for companies to study it and release the data. So if there are still issues that need to be addressed, we know what they are and we can address them, because it's not acceptable to have hardware that works better for men than for women. That's just not going to fly.
Hear, hear.
Just keep talking. Okay. A lot of the issue with women, what we found, Gary, and with the ASC and other things, simply exposed on, and the problem we saw with women in headsets was the different parallax between men and women's eyes, and they weren't being adjusted for that. And obviously not even his head, because he knows this is one of the main issues with it, that women and men, often because of the shape of their face, have different parallax needs. And if the headsets don't compensate for that, that's part of the big reason for that.
Just because we're kind of close on time here, do you want to ask your question?
Okay, my question actually is a little bit more about the response for educators post-COVID. Ron had numbers that were biased by COVID in the chart he ran, because his initial estimation of business development money that went into production of AR and XR product was biased because it was the first year after COVID. That would have been money that had been allocated by corporations in COVID, and then the 2 segments after that were all about the same if you take out the Magic Leap. Now, to that add, the children have now been trained to learn virtually. We have a whole generation of children that have been trained to learn virtually now. And this is the starting point for what we're talking about. This is the initial effort for being able to actually teach children in an XR and VR environment, because we've now kind of got them conditioned into working in a virtualized space for education.
Your question is?
That's the question. Does anybody else feel that way? Do you see that having this resource of a number of children, being trained in virtualized education to come up and do that? Do you, as the people in the room, see that as a development? When these children get to a certain point, these devices are going to be much more popular.
I would say definitely yes. I mean, a lot of the work that we do, especially when we do work on the entertainment side, mostly for Meta, is geared towards the younger audience. And just speaking from my own experience, like my nieces and nephews love VR. It's like none of them have it, but they're obsessed with it. Every time they see me, it's like, we want it, like, did you bring VR headsets? Do you have the latest ones? Like, how many did you bring? And then they disappear for however long, I see them, which is, so I think that there is an incredible interest, especially I would say kind of in this kind of people, kids that are kind of 17 to 14 right now, that are kind of being exposed to this. They're absolutely enamored by it. So I think as that demographic starts to age up, especially the workforce, become kind of consumers legitimately with the economy. I mean, they're gonna be very interested, I think, in this technology, both for social experiences, for entertainment, also for work and productivity. And it's just going to all continue to blossom from all that. So yeah, I'm really encouraged, and I would like to see these companies who are creating headsets doing a lot more work to get these headsets into schools, into places where people can actually like experience this and learn.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the other side of that is proof that kids can learn more effectively with headsets.
Oh.
So I know there is empirical proof out there. I don't know how well the education system has been made aware of that, but you know, there was a precedent for this. You know, is 10 years ago, school systems started buying Chromebooks and laptops for their students because they realized what a powerful teaching tool or adjunct to teaching that technology could be. And so it follows that if it can be proven that VR is an effective way of learning, then it seems like it will be adopted.
Yeah, out in our spaces, you know, if we look at using XR technology to train concepts like history and math and physics, it goes back to the ROI. If they can learn it more effectively and more quickly, that's great. Are the schools going to spend money on that approach? Are content creators going to create the content assuming that schools are going to spend on that approach? If I take a high school kid in a high school program and put them into a certification where they're getting their OSHA cert or their Toyota Tex and Tex Elite training done more rapidly where they can get into a job more quickly, there's definitely an ROI there. And the state will pay for that economic development and you know that approach. So we're starting with that approach out here in the areas where I'm working to get it in for the rapid certifications. But I think it will be pulled in to use in those other spaces as well. We're also seeing it actively used for robotics and for drones here, drone operators, that type of thing. But
Can I chime in? I know Bree here in the audience had a comment she wanted to mention or a question. Bree?
Yes, so sorry, but I just wanted to chime in because I have been, teaching in VR for about 5 years at DePaul University and at the University of Toronto. And I also have middle schoolers who regularly play gorilla tag in my house. And so what we're seeing on the ground is one, in terms of the research that Ron's talking about, we're working on some of these questions in my lab, but the research isn't strong in this area. If VR is a better way to deliver educational content. And so we're still kind of working on that. I do think that there is a level of sort of middle schoolers who maybe aren't really even supposed to be in those programs who are getting more introduced into VR. But what I see with my college students who were Zoom high school students, right? So they're very willing to do remote learning and to do distributed learning. That part of the process is fine, but they really need you to have a value add to why we're doing this in a VR headset that now, I mean, I give them VR headsets so they don't have to buy them, but now I have to think about buying 50 of them and how long are they going to last? And maybe it's going to make them a little dizzy. And now they have to deal with the program and they have to deal with the headset and the hardware and the Wi-Fi and all of that. So it has to be better than Zoom. And I have to be able to do things and show them things that go beyond other sort of distributed channels. And we're just, it's that 5 years out thing, right? It feels like we're just on the edge of where those things can be possible, but we're not quite there yet. And just because they're the Zoom generation doesn't mean they'll translate into immersive environments because they have Zoom, right? It has to fulfill a niche that goes above and beyond Zoom.
That's a good
Just-
point.
I'll just chime in real quickly. I think the thing that's missing that I think that kids need and want for this is asynchronicity, not synchronicity. Synchronicity is a massive sync on everybody's time. We all know it from Zoom and from meetings. We all have to be in the same place at the same time. Education is both synchronous and asynchronous, right? And I think that we have not yet cracked the nugget on how to make XR experiences more asynchronous. And that's going to be, think about chat or IM texting on your phone. That's an asynchronous experience mostly. We haven't figured that out yet. So that's a big untapped resource. The other thing is just, I think that we're going through a cycle now, and we see it with all the return to work stuff, that the pendulum is swinging back the other way. We got sick of all the remote work. I didn't, but a lot of companies did get sick of all the remote work, and they want everyone back in the office now. And I think the kids also didn't have a great time with Zoom, and it's more like, I don't know that they also necessarily want in-person experiences, but they want richer experiences in some way. Once XR catches up to that in a few years, the pendulum can swing back again, but I wouldn't expect it to be just because they went through COVID, now they're going to look for XR experiences to get them those same experiences. Now they're going to really value the in-person ones, I think, more now because they missed it. And when the value comes around to show why we can have really good personas or avatars that are expressive and they make eye contact and they have all the pro-social cues, then I think maybe people will start to gravitate back to it because it will be better than Zoom. And ultimately, it can be even in some ways better than face-to-face in real life. Not that I'm saying it's always better, but there are some superpowers that you can give that you can't have in real life. And we need to demonstrate what those are, and it's still going to take time to develop them and to make the devices ubiquitous enough to make that common.
All right, so I'm going to jump in. We're running close on time here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let our panelists, I'm going to jump in and actually answer this a little bit as well from my own experience. But before I do that, I want to let our panelists know what's coming so they have time to think about what they want to say. Because we're going to go into closing remarks, which means each panelist is going to have about 20 seconds to give a closing statement, pretty much their choice on what they say. At that point, Caroline will then give a quick closing statement. I'll give mine. We'll go over some housekeeping and then get back to the remainder of the evening, which will be some networking and some drinking and hanging and having snacks and drinking, not necessarily alcoholic, but it's there if you'd like to. With that said, the thing I want to jump in about, and like everyone's kind of touched on pieces of this, which I find is interesting. Avi brought up the asynchronous aspect of it. The thing that I've kind of said that I want to see, and I mean, I'd love to build it, frankly, but I don't know how to get the funding for this, is I want to see Khan Academy in VR, where you basically have an AI algorithm that knows your learning style, knows how to, the more you interact with it, the more it learns about how you learn, allows you to advance at different subjects at different paces. It can track your interests. It can teach you the way that is most effective for you to pick up subjects. And, I don't see it replacing. So like the biggest thing I've noticed with almost everybody who talks about XR is it's like, they look at XR as a replacement. Like, okay, we're not going to train people physically anymore. We're going to train them in VR because no, supplements. Like this doesn't have to be a one or the other. It can be both. And that's one of those things that I really think gets missed a lot. I see the value in the XR solutions, clearly, without a doubt. But I don't think we have to throw away what works, and I don't think we have to apply it to everything. There are things that I think will always be easier to teach in person live, in groups. There are things that I think people will always learn faster if they're not live and not in groups and not encumbered. We spoke a little bit about the concept of the isolation of the headsets. One of the things that was a very, very, in terms of the consumer headsets, it was a relatively early adoption. The Windows XR headset had the ability to flip up. And a lot of us, I know, thought that was great. It's really cool. Why does every headset now not have that? It's such an easy thing to do. But again, it's a matter of learning. It's a matter of things going on as they've gone. With that, I think I've given everybody time to prep their statement, so I'm going to call on them in a random order. But I know a lot of people do think that education is, frankly, a lot of people have said, what's the killer app for XR? Education, absolutely, positively. How do we get to it? I don't know. I think the students learn better. I think a lot of the teachers don't necessarily know how to apply it yet. So we'll see where that all goes and where that shakes out over the years. With that said, I'm going to go with Avi first.
Closing thoughts. Well, I agree with things that you just said, Matt. Since I didn't get a chance to really talk about the XR Guild, I'm actually going to use the 20 seconds to talk about the XR Guild. And if you will go to xrguild.org, it is a nonprofit 501(c) charity that is dedicated to promoting ethics.
I'm going to pause you because we lost you.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, you lost me. I guess I'll
come right back in and ask you to restart. We heard you say XR Guild, and then my screen just dropped.
All right, we'll do it again. So when you get a chance, go to xrguild.org. It is a nonprofit charity. We actually ask for people to join and help volunteer, even more than donate. But if you want to donate, that's great. But the purpose of it is, and really in an elevator pitch, real simple, is every other field other than computer science that has an impact on people has ethical standards. They have professional societies. If you think about doctors, lawyers, journalists, civil engineers, they're ethical standards, but computer science doesn't yet have it. And in AI and XR especially, we need it because there are real world harms that happen. So we're there to promote this idea and to support each other when we need to make ethical decisions in our daily work. We're there to provide the information of what mistakes have been made in the past and how can I learn from them so we don't make those same mistakes again. So we're helping all of that, and we'd love for people to join, come and volunteer or donate, and help promote the idea of ethics in the field. It's very inclusive, very diverse, and we would love to have you join us.
Thank you, Avi. Ron, next.
So in this I am.
That's someone.
I'm super bullish on.
We're losing some audio here, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can
Shelley
hear.
and Caroline, can you both mute, please? Because I think I'm seeing feedback from one of you, but I can't tell which one.
Testing. Okay, seems better. Okay, so I was just saying that I'm actually pretty bullish on the direction that Meta is currently going. Not necessarily a big fan of the company or its founder, but where they're going with the Ray-Ban glasses and Project Orion is super interesting to me. It's all about situational awareness driven by AI and agentic AI, basically, that promises to be providing us with the information and the experiences and the knowledge that we want and need when we want and need it. And so, that's the future I want for XR. And so I'm bullish on the direction they're going and believe in it.
All right, Shelley.
All right, I'd like to use my 20 seconds to say thank you to everyone who attended tonight and for the questions. It's obvious from the questions that you're informed and passionate about this technology, which all of us here on the panel, I think, really appreciate. Encourage you to get in touch with additional people in the industry. It's a small industry space still, and a very friendly industry space. It's one of the things I love about this industry. And if there's ever anything that I can help with, or connections, or anything along that line, please reach out. But thank you for joining us tonight.
All right. I would say that I'm really just always super excited with what keeps showing up in the industry. I started, about 10 years ago myself. But with some of the advancements that we're seeing, we are continually closer to it really being valuable for people. And we keep, I think a lot of us who have been working in this industry have shown in sort of, often sort of like isolated use cases, but extreme value for those companies that have like really embraced this tech. And so I'm just really encouraged for more companies to start using this. I feel like this whole past year, we've had a lot of new companies want to work with us. And so if you're working in an industry and you think that this technology might be useful for you, it is. And so I guess I would leave that with, seek out developers, seek out companies that can help you build on the value that you can use with XR. And I'm excited for the next 5 years, the next 10 years. So.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, Caroline.
I think I had to think hard about this one, and I think I'm going to come back with, I actually am pretty bullish about the combination of AI and blockchain and spatial computing. I know that we talked a little bit about blockchain before. I just think that they all need each other in a lot of ways. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next several years. But yeah, that's my thought.
All right, thank you. So before I get to my closing remarks, first of all, can I get a round of applause for all of our presenters? And thank you. You guys can actually jump off the stage if you want to at this point. You don't have to sit up here through the rest of my stuff. Thank you very much. Oh, you just leave it there. Yeah. So my closing remarks on this in terms of industry outlook, you know, I have yet to encounter a time when I think that the adoption of XR is not accelerating. It is still accelerating. It's moving much slower than I thought it would. I'll be the first to say that. But I also think that every time I do sort of look at it, the pace of adoption is accelerating slowly, but it is getting faster and faster all the time. I am one of the many people, I'm sure you brought this up around, so I'm gonna retort on that with Meta. What they did last week, the big announcement that they made last week, where they made the big change with Meta for Business, and the way that they announced that and the way that they launched that, and what that does to a lot of people who have deployed solutions that now have to go rethink how those deployed solutions are gonna work, because some of them might not work anymore. Like, that is something that becomes a barrier and a hurdle to this industry, but ultimately, you know, in the solutions that I've frankly worked on with other companies in the past, like, we've been through this before. Like, this is especially in the XR space, this is not new. It's happened before. And so we kind of expect it at this point. And, you know, someone else spoke to, I think it was Bree's question, or, and Shelley spoke to this a little bit too, the longevity of the solution. One of the things that I love about this technology is you can get so much ROI from an implementation so quickly that to a certain degree, you don't really have to worry about the longevity of it from a financial perspective, because you can get ROI almost instantly. You do have to plan for rolling with these changes that are going to happen, and ultimately, frankly, to a certain degree, expect them. They're going to change. This is a young technology. It is constantly evolving. You're going to have to upgrade the hardware. And I think it's going to be changing rapidly for the next several years. I don't think we're going to hit a slow pace anytime soon. I'm just hoping that, again, the awareness of the value that you can get instantly, immediately today outweighs the hesitation that people who look at those rapid changes and say, ooh, this is scary. I don't know if I want to make a big investment here, because what if that headset's not going to last very long? I'm really hoping that people get to see the value you can achieve already, and that doesn't drive, I'll say, delays. But with that said, let me get to our housekeeping. So, you know, this has been a great topic on industry outlook. I'm actually not even going to talk about donation again. I thought we had gone through that. What I do want to talk about really quickly is the Chicago XR Summit. This is an exhibition style event. This is the first time, again, that we are doing this event in Chicago the way that we've done it. We have done previous very demonstration-focused events. We are looking to demonstrate what I will call them business solutions here. We are looking to demonstrate to the industry in Chicago, the enterprises in Chicago, what the value of this technology is. We're not going to tell them. We're not going to hold stage presentations. We're going to show them. We want you guys to come in and experience solutions, things that are already in market today that can be creating value for your company by implementing them tomorrow. And we want to frankly wake Chicago up to this, because I've been out to Augmented World Expo several times. I've been to other summits and other conferences, and I will say that the awareness in Chicago in particular seems very low of the value you can get for this technology. Almost every time I'm on a consulting engagement and I start to bring up examples of how this technology is being used, people are very surprised. And that's partially why I've also made it very intentional to partner with P33, Chicago Innovation, 2112, Illinois Chamber of Commerce, the organizations that will get these enterprises to the event so that they actually understand, oh no, there's real money to be made here. We're still, it is still part of the Next Evolution event series. It is still going to be a free event. All of that is going to be taking place. We're just going to do it on a much bigger scale, and we're looking to grow it. So that's all I'm going to say about XR Summit. We just announced it last week, so you guys are frankly hearing about it more before a lot of other people. We haven't even opened up really requests for people who want exhibit space other than the people who've exhibited requests in the past and sponsors, but that's going to be going out very soon as well. So I'll share more about that on our socials, which is why I will tag again and say, please follow our socials and share. With that said, we have our upcoming topics. Our next month will be our last event at 1871 in the Merchandise Mart, since they are going to be giving up the space at the end of April, but we are still doing it there. The topic is artificial intelligence. Obviously, that came up a lot tonight. We are bringing in some, we already have 2 of our speakers confirmed that I know of, and they're both very big experts on artificial intelligence, and to a certain degree, the cross-section of artificial intelligence and XR. The following month, we will be back here at 2112, and we'll be doing games. And because games, frankly, is a big industry. We've done games before. This time, we're definitely focusing on the different type of gamer experiences. So that'll be kind of a fun approach to that topic. And then in June, of course, we'll have the XR Summit. With that said, I want to get back to what's going on for the rest of the evening here before I close this out, which is that we have Envision here, who's going to be doing demonstrations. We have Past Reality here, who's going to be doing demonstrations. We have Voyeur here, who's going to be doing demonstrations. So please hang around, have some snacks, have a drink, and try the demonstrations out. Because, you know, I've said this before, you will understand more about this technology 5 minutes in a headset than 3 hours of people talking to people about it. But with that said, thank you all for being here once again. Please, you know, follow us, like our stuff, and come back and tell other people and bring them with you. But thanks again. That's the end of the event, and I'll be talking with you all in the networking.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you so much, Avi. This is terrific.
And one last thank you to all of our presenters, and to Caroline and Tom for making this stuff front, and Ben for checking everybody in. Where's Ben?
All right.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.